Welcome back to the Table Rush Talk Show, where we dive deep into the world of entrepreneurship, marketing, and personal growth. I'm your host, Misha Zvagansoff, and today's guest is Christy Pretzinger, CEO of WG Content, a company that has revolutionized healthcare content strategy. We dive into her journey of scaling a multi-million-dollar business, all while building a company culture based on kindness. Christy shares her unique approach to leadership, empowering sales teams, and the power of Enneagram in fostering radical empathy. If you're looking to grow your business with heart and strategy, this episode's for you. Christy, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Indeed. So first off, I do just want to say you are a prolific podcast guest speaker.
I really enjoy doing it. It's really fun to meet all of the people, the podcast hosts, and find like-minded people and just have interesting conversations. One of my favorite things to do.
Yeah. So I just was noting as well, I love guest speaking on podcasts as well. I do it all the time. I talk about it all the time, help people do it. And I was like, man, if I wanted to guest speak on some podcasts, I would just Google your name. So everybody watching, listening, whatever, Google Christy Pretzinger, and you've been on like a who's who of these great business podcasts, thought leader podcasts, and you could hack that list. So literally, when I'm done with this, I'm gonna reach out to all those podcasts to
Good
guest speak
idea.
on
They've
them.
been great.
Yeah, so thank you for that. What are your favorite things to speak on when you jump on a podcast?
Well, I'm actually working on a book called Your Cultural Balance Sheet, Keys to Creating an Environment Where People Can Thrive. And that's actually my passion. Although I have built a multi-million-dollar business over the years, it's been probably about 20 years. But that, as you mentioned, I always did it with an eye towards building a business based on kindness. And then I got busy building the business, which, as anybody who's built a business knows, you wear every hat, you've got your head down, you're working all the time. And it wasn't until about 5 years ago that I realized that wanting to build a business based on kindness actually had resulted in the way the whole business is structured, the way that we work, and the culture that together we have created. So I'd love to talk about that.
Awesome. And you also, I would be remiss if I didn't say anybody watching, listening, you can check out Christy's company if you're resonating with what she's saying and you're grooving on it. You can go to wgcontent.com, wgcontent.com. And there your main business is focusing on content creation for the healthcare industry, correct?
Yeah, we do strategy and creation. So we start with content strategy, and then we create content, but not like in the social media sense of being a content creator. We have a team of like 35 people and upwards of 100 contractors that we work with. And we do all sorts of every kind of content you can think of within the healthcare ecosphere. So it's everything from infographics to blog content to website content, all physician bios, all that kind of stuff. And then we also serve other businesses like agencies that serve hospitals and healthcare. And then we do content for them as well.
And tell me give me a vision of, so you work direct to companies like end user, let's call them. Sorry, my brain's a little fuzzy. It's 8 a.m. where I am. Kick in coffee, kick in, my
Yes.
goodness. Anyway, so the end user as well as the agencies who serve the end user, is it 50-50 or is it, do you
It's
prefer?
probably still more very large healthcare systems that we work with, primarily, although we're always looking at other verticals and other things, to do to expand. We've got such a wonderful team, and we've spent a lot of time developing excellent processes for a lot of different things that make us very nimble and able to move into other vertical markets as well.
Fantastic. So somebody who, what did you call them? I'm calling them the end user, but you said a healthcare system, I think is
Healthcare
what you said.
systems, like very large healthcare systems, like in your area, maybe like UCLA. We work with them, like we work with UC Gosh, UC Berkeley, I think, is one that so we work with all the big systems, and sometimes with individual hospitals within those systems. It depends on how they're set up. Sometimes marketing is centralized to one place. Sometimes it's in different, hospitals that are part of the system. It all just depends.
Cool. And so somebody who has a big system and is how do they find you? How does UC Berkeley end up in your lap, the UC Berkeley system? Or does that question make sense? Like
Yeah, sure.
they're thinking they need a new vision or to revamp what they're doing, or the head of the healthcare of UC Berkeley is like, I don't like our message, or what's going on there? How does
Well,
that
we've
come
been we've
about?
been around for a long time. In fact, we actually created a category. When I first started building the business, it was kind of in a nutshell. What happened was that I was building the business, and I had an advertising. I had been a freelance writer for quite a while before I started doing this, and there was an advertising agency in my city that needed a team of writers to a project. And so I did that, and it worked really well. And I thought, oh, teams of writers for website contents. This would have been like in 2007. I thought that's a good idea. And then fast forward a few months, a former client was a marketing director at a hospital, and they were launching 3 hospital websites, and they needed someone to write that content. And so like within a week, I had like 35 writers on it. And I mean, I didn't know anything about hospitals. I mean, I didn't know one thing, but we did all of that, and it went really well. And I thought, oh, then I told myself the entrepreneurial necessary lie, which is it will be easy to bring teams of writers to hospitals. Right, the necessary lie. You really have to do that, or else you'd never get out of bed. So I
That
tried to
is
do that.
amazing.
Yeah, I tried to do it, and nobody in Cincinnati, which is where I live, none of the hospitals would talk to me. You can't be a prophet in your own hometown. So I went to Columbus, which is nearby, and started working with the Ohio State University, and we still work with them to this day. So that was kind of how it just started. It was just me, I had my head down, just like going places and trying to talk to people. And then I landed a very large contract with Indiana University, and that was in 2011. And then right after that, I hired my first salesperson, which was a game changer. And she's still with the organization 13 years later. I've literally watched her grow up. She had just gotten married when she joined us, and now she has 5 children. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Um, so
Oh, so I didn't answer. I'm sorry. How we
no,
actually get
no.
the clients is, so when we started, there weren't any other companies that were creating content just for hospitals. It didn't exist. There were advertising agencies that might do some writing, but there was nobody that did just content. We didn't do SEO. We didn't have an SEO arm. We write for SEO, but we do not do SEO per se. We don't do user experience. We don't do web development and design. We do content. That was what we did. And so when we started in the industry, I started going to conferences. And then we started doing that. We started becoming well known when I hired that salesperson. She's brilliant. And then we hired another salesperson. Let's see. Well, the person who's my COO now, we hired 12 years ago. And then 10 years ago, we hired who is our EVP of business development and marketing right now. And they're a dynamite team. And so they're incredibly well known in the industry. We are known as pretty much the gold standard in the industry. So people know us. So a lot of times, I mean, a lot of our business is repeat business, as people know. That's always great, right? Keep a client and go further into that client. But if somebody like UC Berkeley would find us, frequently it would be from a conference. Of course, we do outbound. Our salespeople do that and stuff. But very frequently they know our name, and if they're in the looking zone, they might reach out to us.
Cool. So, two things I want to talk on quick. First off, I'm looking at your website, wgcontent.com, and it says, insightful strategies, vivid content brought to you by a team of people who are passionate about shaping meaningful experiences for your audiences in the health space. And then now we're talking about UC Berkeley. You've named all these big colleges or universities. What's the bridge between that and health space? So my brain is like, wait a minute, are you focusing on the health space niche within UC Berkeley, or does that
No, no,
question
no.
make
We're
sense?
working with largely hospitals in the healthcare ecosphere, with the exception of pharmaceutical. We do not work with pharmaceutical.
Okay.
And we don't do medical writing per se. People that have, Masters of Science degrees and things like that, that would do like peer-to-peer communications between physicians. We don't really dabble in that because that's pretty specialized, but we do all of the other stuff. So we might interview, a neurosurgeon, and then our writer will do the alchemy of turning that content into something that is readable at a 5th to 8th grade reading level, depending on who the target audience is for that. So
I
that's
love it.
magic.
Yeah, that is magic.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Dumbing down the techno babble, shall we
Well,
say? Or
yeah, it's like, the thing is that if someone goes to an academic medical center, chances are good they've already been through a local hospital system, which might be a for-profit system. And then you would go, say, to Ohio State or something. You've probably already been through some things that would lead you to go to the academic route. So, for example, if you're talking about a community hospital, you might say, ear, nose, and throat doctor. If you're talking about an academic medical center, you would use the term otolaryngology, and the reader would understand that because they've probably already worked through the system and now they're in trouble.
okay,
Not always, but sometimes.
got it, got it, got it. Thank you for that. Let's talk about your salesperson who you hired, salesperson number one, who's still with you, grown a family. You've watched her grow up. You said she's brilliant,
Mhm.
among other accolades for her. Why is she brilliant? What she's doing? What's going on?
Oh my gosh, I could go on all day about this. Her name's Reba, and she first of all, when she joined me, it was just me really, and I had a couple other employees that were project managers, and it was just me. She went to a conference 5 days after she had been hired, and she really wasn't even sure what to say. She had not done this. She'd been a salesperson, but she hadn't sold this product or this service. And she would stand next to me, and I would I could watch her listen to me. And then she would talk to someone and say exactly what I had said. And this was 5 days in. Now I mean, every single person that I have hired that I did their role, every single one of them is smarter than me in their role and does it better than I ever could have. And so she took that and made it her own. She's incredibly thoughtful. And I don't mean thoughtful and kind, she is that, but she's thoughtful about her approaches when she does a statement of work for a client. She really, really thinks it through very carefully. She is very curious and asks wonderful questions, like she's on our leadership team, and brings a different perspective that I very much appreciate. And she's brilliant at sales too. I mean, we have an incredibly high close rate because the two salespeople are so extraordinary.
Wow. Do you think Reba, most of it's intuitive, natural, it's her personality, or would you say, oh, she's learned it, it's been groomed in her, she's had good mentors, or is it a mix? Does that question make sense?
I kind of think that a salesperson, there's an innate ability that you need to have, because what you're actually doing, at least in our case, our mission is building relationships one word at a time. So we are not transactional with our clients. Even the first contact we have with a client is not transactional. It's like, tell us about your situation. What are you looking for? That kind of thing. But the magic of a salesperson is being able to monetize that relationship. And that's the most difficult part of the sales process. And you either know how to do that or you don't. And even if you are mentored to within an inch of your life, if you do not have that innate ability to do that, you will not succeed as a salesperson. And she has that innate ability.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I've had sales teams over the years, and you can have two people that have access to the exact same tools, exact same scripts, very smart, all these things. And a customer will say yes to one person and won't to another for some reason. And by all appearances, you would think that they're the same. That salesperson is the same. I
Yeah,
think you
for
talked.
us,
Yeah, go ahead.
we don't do scripted sales or anything like that. Everything
Yeah,
we do is highly custom. So we wouldn't have a situation where two people would have the exact same, opportunities to do that kind of comparison.
sure.
But that said, they do have access to the same tools, and like I said, if someone has access to all the tools and can't do it, it's not because they're a bad person. They might be great at building relationships. They just might be not be great at monetizing that relationship and closing the sale. And that's okay. It's not for everybody, but Reba is innately that. And then of course, over 13 years, she's grown and matured and has so much institutional knowledge. It's like she's probably forgotten more than I know at this. So there's incredible value there. I mean, as you know, having long-term employees, people that have been here 10, 12, 13 years, that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that speaks to the culture that you've created, and we'll get to that at some point, but I'm having fun
Sure.
talking about this other stuff because I love
Sure.
sales. So bear with me as we
Okay, sure.
grind along. So Reba, you said something else. You said she's thoughtful about her approaches when she creates, the scope of work or the offer. You called it
Mhm.
something else for the
Statement of work, a statement of
statement of,
SOW. Yeah.
yeah, the statement of work for the client. And like she creates these thoughtful statements of work that obviously inspire among other things, inspire these clients to action. Could you put words to why you said she's thoughtful, or like what's the nuance where you go, oh yeah, this is good? Does that
Well, I'll
make
tell
sense?
you, first of all, we have two salespeople, both of whom are
Okay.
outstanding. The other one is
Yeah.
Kirsten. I don't want to not speak. If we're going to talk about them, I want to talk about both of
Sure.
them.
Yeah, yeah.
And she is amazing too. And they're very different. Reba is when I say thoughtful, she is someone who, let me give you an example. I am a fast processor. So it doesn't necessarily make me smarter and it can make me impulsive, but I speak quickly and I think quickly. Reba is a more deliberate thinker. If you ask her a question, she needs time to think about it. And I've learned, because I'm a grown up, that I can moderate my behavior. So if I ask a question in a leadership team meeting, I can stop talking and give her the space to process that question and then come up with an answer. Now, Kirsten, on the other hand, is like me. She's a quick verbal processor. And both of us kind of, we don't know what we say until we start speaking because we're verbal processors. And so she's a little faster. And her sales approach, although she is incredibly thoughtful in her sales approach, she's very deliberate in the way she builds relationships with her clients. And she's developed that over many years. She's worked here for 10, almost 10, but she had a sales career prior to that as well. But obviously, she spent most of her career here. And she is different in her approach, but also equally successful. So it's interesting that you can have very different personalities, but yet both of them succeed at closing sales. They both know how to monetize that relationship. They both know how to successfully build a relationship that is not transactional, that is thoughtful. And one of the things that I say, and you can hear it on the video on our website, is that we are not the kind of vendor, if you want to use that word, that comes in and says, you're doing everything wrong. Here's how you need to do it. We come in and we say, we don't know the sandbox in which you're playing. So we're going to ask you questions about it, and then we're going to jump right in that sandbox with you and help you dig your way out in the best way possible.
This is awesome. I love the perspective and the awareness. And I don't know if I would be able to have it. You have two types of employees, salespeople that work. You have two salespeople that I know of, maybe more, but the two
Too.
core salespeople
Yeah.
that work for you. We've got Reba, very thoughtful about her approaches, needs the space to think, the quiet, like shh
Hmm.
for a minute, right? And then you've got
Kirsten.
Kirsten. Yep, been with you for 10 years,
Hmm.
and Kirsten likes to talk it out and then talk through to get to that aha moment, call it what you
Hmm.
will. Was that is one more frustrating for you, or did you the capacity to support both those types of people is very powerful, I think, is what I'm trying to say, where some leader might get really frustrated that Kirsten just starts talking, right? Or
Yeah, I mean, I think that this does get into the culture. One of the things that we use in our organization is called the Enneagram. I don't know if you're familiar with the Enneagram.
I
Of
was
course,
going to
you're
ask
in
you about
California. So we use the Enneagram, and I was introduced to it about 15 years ago. And it was really life-changing for me because it changed the way I parent. And it certainly changed the way I lead the organization. Because for people who aren't familiar, very, very broadly, the Enneagram is 9 personality types. There's a lot more to it, but broadly, there's 9. And what it does is it looks at your motivation for your behavior as opposed to just your behavior. So like Kirsten and I are both fast processors, but we are different types on the Enneagram. So why we do the things we do is very different. And I understand that, because what the Enneagram has allowed us to do, because we type everybody that joins our organization, and then we do workshops and lunch and learns and all sorts of things to really let people understand their type, but even more importantly, their colleagues' types. Because when you understand that, first of all, they think that the self-awareness that the Enneagram really fosters is key. I mean, I don't think that you can overestimate the importance of self-awareness. And so that's number one. And that's where I learned that I needed to moderate my behavior, that the way I can be very directive and talk really fast can be off-putting to people. And that's never good. So I learned to moderate that behavior. And then I learned, oh, I'm a head type within the Enneagram, and that means I process quickly. And Reba, for example, is a heart type, and she processes more slowly. I'm not going to go into the details on this. It's not a workshop on the Enneagram. But I learned that, and I realized, and I have other types who are body types who process even more slowly. And I realized that my rapid processing could shut them down. So it was never about them frustrating me. As the leader, I was always looking at how can I create a space where, especially on my leadership team, but with all employees, when I was building it, a long time ago, where they feel safe, for lack of a better word, to really share their ideas. I mean, you have to be vulnerable, right? You can't get to creativity without vulnerability. No innovation happens without vulnerability. And so I have to demonstrate vulnerability first by letting people know I don't know all the answers. And I'm sure I'm not always right. And without good counsel, I could easily run it off the rails. So let's make sure that I hear the ideas and input from everyone. Ultimately, I mean, I'm the only shareholder, so I do ultimately make the decision, but after good counsel, so I'm very fortunate in that, I mean, Kirsten doesn't drive me crazy because she talks a lot at all. I like to hear what she has to say. And Reba doesn't drive me crazy because she processes slowly. She has really valuable questions and insight. My COO, Colleen, she's a heart type and she's brilliant. But with her, she wants to solve a problem. So when we're talking about things, sometimes she'll be like, well, what's the problem? And I'm like, it's not a problem. Let's talk about a puzzle. It's a puzzle to be solved rather than a problem to be fixed. Different headspace. Your words make a difference on how you experience things, right? So none of that drives me crazy. I think what the Enneagram has done for our organization is it lays the groundwork for radical empathy. So instead of thinking that Reba's really slow and it bugs me and I wish she'd move along, I can be like, oh, she's processing this and I'm going to give her the space to do that because I really want to hear what she has to say. So that's the difference. None of the people's behavior that doesn't frustrate me at all. I am privileged to lead a team of incredibly intelligent and creative people. And my job is to remove barriers to their success.
I love that. I have so many questions running through my brain, and one is, you're clearly a powerful leader within your company and have this amazing awareness, growth mindset. I mean, to be able to talk about Reba and Kirsten as you do is very inspiring to me. So thank you for that. I guess my first one is, when did you decide we need to bring in Enneagrams or personality programs? Was it a pain point and you had a moment of self-awareness, or just naturally, or go ahead?
Well, actually, just a woman who's a friend of mine, all these years ago, she introduced me to it. And I guess it would have been 13 years ago because my son's 23. And you don't usually type children, but she typed him because he was so who he was. And that was really eye-opening to me because, as I said, I'm a fast processor. And also, I like to have options. I always want an exit strategy. So I would ask him when he was young, what do you want for your birthday? Make me a list and then I'll pick some things. Well, he would get incredibly stressed out by that because what if I didn't pick the things he really wanted? Because he is a 6 on the Enneagram and he wants guardrails for everything. He wants to know what's going to happen. He's considered a loyal questioner. And he's like, I need to know that I'm safe and I'm going to get what I want from this list. And you're not going to go pick something stupid. I didn't know that. So it changed the way I parented him. And I realized that because of my constant reframing, like when something bad happens, I can reframe it. If I do that too quickly, I am invalidating someone else's experience. Like I was invalidating my son's experience if I reframed something bad that happened to him. I wasn't allowing him to have those feelings of this is horrible, and I had to just kind of let him have that. So when I learned that, then it of course bled into work. And at the time, gosh, 13 years ago, Reba had just joined. So it was probably maybe a year or two after that that I started bringing it into the company. And we had everybody typed and we did workshops, and there were maybe 5 or 6 of us at the time. And so it's always been, for those of us who've been around a long time, it's always been a core. And then as we've grown, it's continued to remain a core. And in fact, we're doing a retreat in August, and we're going to be doing something around the Enneagram as a lunch and learn, because we have a lot of new employees and we need to make sure that they haven't lived with it like those of us who have been around for a long time have lived with it.
Yeah, and I'm imagining somebody who it's new to them, a, a personality profile, or could view it as a control mechanism, right?
Yeah,
Versus
nobody
a
here would
tool.
ever look at it that way. I mean, when they
Okay.
come in, it's like the first response is like, I can't believe this is actually as good as you said it was. I thought you were exaggerating. And it's such I mean, our values are we are empowered, curious, kind, and fun. And every single one of us live those values out every day. Those have been our values for a really long time. They don't change, they remain constant. And I say that they are a thread that goes through our entire organization and upon which all decisions can hang, whether they're my decisions or the team's decisions. And they treat each other with kindness. They empower one another. They are curious about each other and they are fun. We have fun together. So people would never think of, I think I can very safely say no one in this organization would think of this personality typing as controlling. It's the opposite of that. It's actually freeing. I always say I'm sneaking in a little bit of therapy on people with the Enneagram because it's such deep work because you're looking inside yourself. It's not like, oh, I'm an ENTJ and that means I'm this, or I'm a high D, which means I'm this. It's like, oh, okay, I process really quickly and I reframe things and I can be very driven, but I do it. My basis underneath is my fear that everyone and everything is not okay. So I have to make it okay. Whereas like Kirsten is very driven and, very fast. But the reason she is because she's a 3 on the Enneagram and she wants to win and she wants people to like her and she needs to look good. So our behavior may look similar, very different motivations for that.
Oh, interesting. Tell me the values of your company again.
Empowered, curious, kind, and fun.
Empowered, curious, kind, and fun. I
Kind of
love
rolls
that.
off your tongue that way a
It
little bit.
it does. What a great man, if more corporations were the values, empowered, curious, kind, and fun, it perhaps would be a different
A
world.
different
Not that
world.
not that I'm
Yeah.
complaining about the world, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying I
You have a
love
lot
that
to
vision.
complain about, so I would totally get it if you did.
Okay. Right. I
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Um, God's perfect creation.
Mhm.
Yeah. Where did I want to go here? Oh, men to women. What's the ratio of your
Actually,
employees?
all of our employees are women.
Okay.
Women-owned, and all employees are women. Our contractors, we have men in there. Now, part of the reason I think that we had all women to begin with was the company used to be called Writer Girl. That was what it was born as. And then we just recently rebranded in April, actually. We stuck with that name for a long time, even though about 7 years ago or so, we surveyed our clients and said, do you think we should change the name? It doesn't really reflect, this large team of people and the vast amount of services that we have. But at the time they said, yeah, it doesn't, but it's really got staying power. Everybody knows who you are. So then when we kind of realized, like, we really need to change it, because we were talking to some higher ups in organizations like the CMOs and people like that. And many of them, because they don't work directly with us, they might buy from us, but they don't work directly with us. Their team does. When they learned all of the services that we were offering, they're like, oh my gosh, I had no idea you were that big. I didn't know that. And we're like, alrighty, we got to change this. So WG Content is about, I think I said 35 employees, all women. And I'm actually okay with that. And I'll elaborate. I think that for most of my lifetime, there have been businesses that have been largely male dominated, or all men. Women have not been permitted to move into the upper echelons. They still are not permitted to move into the higher levels. The ratio of male to female CEOs is abominable. The number of female entrepreneurs who ever even reach $1 million in revenue is pretty small. 5 million, it's like hen's teeth. I mean, it's abominable. So when I started building this, one of the things I thought about was that I had, as a freelancer, been able to be home with my son. Like, I was working, obviously, and I was always the main breadwinner, and I still am, and that's fine. But I was able to be home and present with him. And I thought, I want other people to be able to do that. I don't think you should have to ask for permission to pick up your kid from school, or to go work in the lunchroom, or go to your own doctor's appointment, or anything like that. I think that's absurd. I think it's childish and micromanaging and overbearing. And I think it's dumb. So I was never going to do that. And so what happened is women were attracted to this because, we know by and large, they still, many times they're the main breadwinner, and they still do all of the home care, taking care of the kids, planning their schedules, picking them up, doing the doctor appointments, all those kind of things. And I thought, well, okay, let's allow these women to do meaningful work, and at the same time still parent their children. And even more importantly, their children see their mothers doing meaningful work and still being a mother and effective at both.
Mm-hmm. So good. Um, that's so good. Do you get any flack from for having not only for having all women?
Flack from who? From where would you anticipate we would get flack? I'm curious.
I
Because that's,
like
I can answer that question. I'm just curious where your head's going with that.
Yeah, my head is going with you've got a positive message. You talk about kindness, the core values. I have them written down and I love them. I'm the same way. I'm I like to say my audience is a heart-centered entrepreneur. So we're moving from the heart
Mhm.
where and I think people might look at me and go, "Oh, I might be classically male, 6'2", things like that, blue eyes. I'm a
Sure,
little older now, so I don't attract the attention that I used to." But like, there's a certain group of people that would, oh, woo woo or this or that, or
sure.
I don't know if I'm answering your question necessarily, but I'm imagining there's a hardcore frat crew or something. I don't know. Maybe there's
Well,
maybe
I mean, I think that if someone would give us flack, they're probably not a fit for us,
yeah,
client wise, or employee or contractor wise.
yeah,
Uh, I I'm gonna like quote Brene Brown. I am all the way over negotiating who I am as a person
yeah.
with anyone. I'll negotiate contracts. I don't negotiate who I am. And who I am is what built this business. And the heart of this business um, is empowered, curious, kind, and fun, building relationships one word at a time. A lot of vulnerability, leading with vulnerability, demonstrating that. A lot of those so-called soft skills, which I really think are the hard ones, they're much harder than accounting, right? In terms of, because it takes attention and intention. You don't just learn it once. You constantly learn it, and you constantly mess up, and you constantly fix it. But those soft skills are, for lack of a better term, they have more feminine energy, not gender energy. Um, and if someone were to give us flack, I would be the person to respond to that because I'm the most comfortable with it. Like, I think Fareed and Kirsten, I don't think anybody's ever even said anything to them about that, to my knowledge. They might be a little less comfortable with it, but I still think they've lived in this culture for a long time. They would be able to answer that question. For employees, we have some younger employees now, thank goodness, because for a while there, I was like, we're going to have one big retirement party. We need some young people. And so we have a lot of young people now and young women. And so they've asked the question about diversity. We have a DEI, team here. And one of the things that I say is that there are many ways of being diverse other than gender and race, many ways. Some of it is age. I mean, I was talking to one of our younger employees and I'm like, we grew up entirely differently. Our lifestyles couldn't be more different. I have great respect for yours and hopefully you have respect for mine. That's diversity and the freedom to be who you are fully at work and at home. It's fine with me. I really honestly am not concerned with the way somebody lives their life. I welcome that. Part of the issue, we have one Black woman that works with us. She's actually my co-author on my book. She's brilliant. She's been here, I think, 8 or 9 years. And she was telling me once, because I asked her about it, I said, do you feel weird being the only person of color in our organization? She said, it's been that way my whole life. She said, I've worked in advertising agencies and in marketing departments my whole life, and I've always been the only Black person. And I said, why do you think that is? And she said, I think that they don't go into the space. They don't go into, most of our employees have liberal arts degrees. And apparently that hasn't been something that's been a driver for the Black community. That doesn't mean we look for diversity. We want diversity in race. In gender, I'm okay if we don't for the time being, because I think that you as a man, it doesn't mean that we don't need both genders, by the way, or all genders. I'm not concerned about that. But I think just like men have a shorthand when they speak with men, they speak differently. They probably speak more freely with men, and the same is true for women. And what that allows is, especially when you look at what happens to little girls, right? Up until 5th grade, they play sports, they're good at math, they do science, and all of a sudden, right around 10, 11, they start getting self-conscious around boys, and they start worrying about their appearance, and they start doing, losing their interest in different things, and they're not pushed to do that either. And the last thing I would want to have happen in my organization is something like that. Like when I think about like some of the younger people and ideas that they've had, it really sparked something in me, because when I left 30 years ago, my job, I realized, and I only could realize this in hindsight, that I was an eager and engaged employee. And on a couple of occasions, I had proposed different things about which I probably knew very little, to be honest with you, at the organization. I was young and I didn't probably have the whole picture and things like that. But instead of being of looking at me and saying, wow, she's engaged, and we could really, teach her, mentor her to come up into leadership, they belittled me. And I thought, when somebody at our organization had an idea and they really just didn't have all the information, I said to my leadership team, I told them that story about me, and I said, we need to be sure we never do that to people. If somebody is engaged and comes up with an idea, but they just don't have all the information, so therefore it's not really a good idea, that's an opportunity to say, oh, hey, great that you're interested, engaged. Let's talk about how we can, put you on a path, or whatever it happens to be, to make sure that we encourage those people. And I think that too, the data support it, that a man is more likely to promote a man based on his potential, because he goes, oh, he reminds me of me. And he will promote a woman based on past performance. The fact that these things are still going on in corporate America literally makes me nauseous. I can't even believe that kind of thing is going on. So therefore, if somebody pushed back, as I'm answering this question very robustly, I would have very, very robust answer for that. And no apologies. No apologies.
I love it. It's amazing. So tell me tell me who's given you flack, or has it ever happened directly,
Oh,
or is
actually, I
it?
haven't. No, I really have never had flack. I think somebody once asked if we would ever hire men. And I said, yeah, maybe. This was a few years ago. Now, if someone asked me that, I would say, I'm not really looking for that. And,
Why ruin a good thing?
yeah, why do that? If we found the perfect person, we'd certainly consider it, but most of the people come to us. We do look for people, obviously, as well, specific skill sets that we need. And interestingly enough, they tend to be women. I do not know why. And it doesn't mean that we don't seek out, other types of people, but that's kind of the way it's happened.
Mm.
And a lot of it too, by the way, Misha, is referral. Like, for example, I hired Reba first. She brought Colleen on next. They had worked together. The two of them together brought on Kirsten. All three of them had worked together previously at another organization. Our content strategist, I think our first or second content strategist, suggested the second content strategist. They both had worked. They didn't leave. This was at a competitor. We would never in a million years poach from a competitor. It's a small world and we know these people. These employees had left that competitor and were working elsewhere, saw that we were working for strategists and knew who we were, and the first one came to work with us, and then she recruited her friend who had worked with her to come. And then together they recruited our marketing manager who also had worked at that organization. Colleen recruited one of our best project managers because they had worked together years ago. There's a lot of that happens. And, people tend to be friends with people that are like them. And so that's how a lot of this has grown too.
Amazing. What's your revenue, if you don't mind me asking?
Our revenue is about 7.
Okay. And that would be 7 million.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
7 to 8.
7 to 8 million. And you said women-owned companies or women entrepreneurs, not a lot of the support isn't there perhaps for, I don't know how you said it, but like that's an anomaly almost.
It's an
Yeah.
anomaly, and there aren't many women. I'm in an organization called Entrepreneurs Organization, which, if anybody listening is an entrepreneur, I highly recommend you look it up. It's a global organization in 65 countries, something like that, and it's close to 20,000 members. The percentage of women is dismal in that. And now part of that is because it is global. There are countries where women still can't own businesses. So, that plays a part. But like, I think even in our chapter, which is not a large chapter, we used to have, I think, 10% women. And that the qualification is you have to be over $1 million in revenue. And so there just aren't that many. And then when you get over 5, it becomes even more rare. But I will say that within EO, that's what we call it. It's a very supportive environment. It's a life-changing environment, a place where if I had known about it when I was going through my divorce, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago, I probably would not have paid spousal support because they would have had experiences around that and would have advised me, because what happens is you have a small group of people called a forum, and you share things that are happening in your life, and then people can share, no advice giving, experience share about similar situations that they've been through and things like that. So that's been another life-changing thing, is being a member of that.
Is your spousal support done?
Yes. And in fact, I paid it for 4 years. And then the month after it was done, I took a month's spousal support, a little bit more actually, and threw one hell of a party. It was better than my wedding reception. It was wonderful.
That's that's amazing. Thank you for answering that question. Um, Something popped up in my mind. I was thinking, you know, I have been in sales and 100% commission, trying to have a business of some sort, having a business of some sort my whole life, right? And so I'm 55 now, and sometimes I'm like, man, if I had to get a job as a 55-year-old male or a 55-year-old woman or a 55-year-old salesperson, huh?
Yeah. I said, anybody.
Anybody. Yeah. I'm like, man, what's the reality of that? Could you speak to that for a sec, maybe? Or
Well, I'm unemployable virtually. I mean, like, if I had to get a job, it would be very bad. I mean, maybe I don't even think I could work at Starbucks. Like, I do not need anybody telling me what to do. It's why I'm the sole shareholder. Um, I don't want a partner. I don't want VC money. I really don't want PE money. I don't want anything to do with anybody telling me what to do. So in terms of getting a job at that age, I mean, I'm 62 and I cannot imagine having to get a job in any capacity. But I will say I have friends, male friends, who are salespeople, and one of them is in his 50s, and he's probably and he works in banking, in sales and big sales. And he has changed jobs. Most recently, he was probably around 55 and got another job, but that was because he's been constantly in sales and he's really good at what he does. And people know who he is because the area in which he sells is a small niche area. And so he's known. And so that was not challenging for him at all, which was really good. I have another one of my partner's friends. Again, I think he's about 55 and he lost his job. I think he was downsized and he got a job very quickly. And I think, again, because he's really good at what he does. So in my experience, that seems to work out. Now, I don't know any women that age in sales looking for a job. Although I will say one of my friends who's a business owner hired a CRO, chief revenue officer, who was a woman. And I think she was older and was very well compensated, so I don't know I think that if you're a good salesperson, you can always find a job,
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. Not that I'm looking for a job, but sometimes,
Well, you do think about it.
Yeah,
I'm
right.
always like,
Really.
if I'm lucky, the whole thing about being an entrepreneur is that like, I haven't run it off the rails yet. Keyword being yet. I was in one of my forum meetings and one of my forum mates, and these are all entrepreneurs, said, things are never as bad as I think they're going to be. I don't live in a trailer by the river. And I piped in and I went, yet. And he was like, exactly, yet. And I mean, this guy is vastly successful, massive amounts of revenue, and it's just funny because, like I said, my motivation for everything is fear. So I'm constantly like, oh God, could the whole thing fall apart? Unlikely at this point, but
Unlikely. Um, who are your favorite leaders and why?
gosh, I've got a lot of them. I mean, who doesn't love Simon Sinek? That guy's brilliant. And what I love about him is the way that he's like, I don't really say anything new. I just absorb a lot of information and deliver it differently. And I think that's very much how I feel like what I do. I mean, I've so many things because I am older and I did so much work on myself. I continue to, but more when I was younger, that really hard work when you're unpacking your childhood and stuff, that it's all become part of my DNA. You know what I mean? So I don't really think about where did I get that information? Like, was it a certain coach? Was it, I don't know. But I would say Simon Sinek, Brené Brown, I think she's brilliant. When I watched her TED Talk in 2010 about vulnerability, I was at that point in my life, someone who would have gone to my grave saying vulnerability was weakness. I had learned that in my life, in my personal life, in my business career. And when I watched that, I was gobsmacked. And I think I watched it like 10 times. I was like, wait, what? What is she talking about? And then I was like, oh, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. But then I read her books. I worked on it. I learned that it's actually strength. I also understood how important it was for me as a leader to demonstrate vulnerability. At that time in 2010, I probably only had 2 employees. Reba hadn't even joined me yet. So I was still actively really working hard at building the business. But then as time went on, I realized as this team was growing, I'm like, if I want people to be innovative and creative, I have to demonstrate vulnerability, so I had to get comfortable with that. And, now I'm pretty okay with it, but I wasn't. It's a long road, right?
Very long road.
Yeah.
Anyone else?
Um, well, I mean, I also read a lot of things that people would consider woo-woo. Like I love Deepak Chopra's books. I love Michael Singer. Um, who else? I'm not a huge like nonfiction reader unless it's more on the spiritual side, a lot of the Enneagram books and things like that. I mean, I've read them over time, obviously a long time ago, I read a lot of business books and things like that, but I don't really do that now. In terms of leaders, I'll tell you, some of them are my friends. The first president of the Cincinnati chapter of EO that I worked under, because I was on the board for 7 years, she remains the best leader I've ever worked under directly. Absolutely incredible. She is strong, but she's kind. She's very clear. She sets expectations and holds you to them. She is direct without being unkind. And she's amazing. She's absolutely a remarkable leader. And actually, she just finished her tenure as the global chair of EO, which means she was in charge of the entire organization, unpaid, and traveled the world. I mean, she was around the world constantly. She's been on every continent except Antarctica with EO, visiting chapters and doing work for the organization is lucky to have had her. She's a brilliant leader.
What was her name?
Her name is Lynn Anstedt, and
Lynn
she
Ans.
is a dear friend as well as an incredible leader. Yeah.
Yes. Was she at your I'm done with my spousal support
You know
party?
what? I I can't remember if she was in town. I think she wasn't in town. And so she ended up missing it, which was a shame because I was definitely in EO by that time and I knew her very well, but I think she was out of town.
Mm. So Michael Singer, I love Michael Singer. Obviously Deepak, Brene, all of them. But I've read all of Michael Singer's books except for his most recent one. I don't know how recent it is anymore. Maybe the last
Same.
year or two.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you read that one or
I
no?
haven't
Or
read it yet. Yeah, I haven't read
yeah.
it yet. I have
And
it, which is the first step.
yes.
It's on my shelf right there.
I, I appreciate that. I will definitely have had books that have been very influential in my life sit there for decades. And I'm finally like, I
Absolutely.
think I'll read that one.
It might
I'm
be time to
ready.
read that.
It
Yeah,
might be time to. Do you
exactly.
ever play with A Course in Miracles or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I did that many years ago. In fact, in my bathroom, I have a quote from Marianne Williamson because I used to listen to her. Current situation aside, she was one of the most brilliant lecturers on Course in Miracles that I've ever heard. And back in the 90s, I used to listen to her all the time. Um, and she definitely informed a lot of my worldview.
Mm.
But I also have a worldview that will work with California, not so everywhere else. That is very you create your own reality, not The Secret, because I think that's just all about I want a car, but about like connecting with your whatever you want to call it. Some people use the word God, although that's kind of a loaded term. I like to use all that is because I believe in my own worldview that we are part of all that is. So we're part of something bigger and that we are creating our experiences, by our attitudes, by our behaviors. I mean, the field of epigenetics supports that. So there's a lot of things around it that have come out. The whole quantum field it supports the fact that we create our own reality. I mean, and I read a book back in 1978. I can't believe I read it then. I can't believe I understood a word of it because I've read it many times since. And it was called The Nature of Personal Reality. And it's mind-boggling. And it informed my worldview. So I was really lucky at age 17 to have come across something that really, it was written in like 1963. And in it, they talk a lot about quantum physics, which wasn't a thing at the time, trying to explain the fact that time is simultaneous and how, all these different kinds of things. And I remember I would sit there and I would, of course, laying out in the sun because I was 17, I would read a paragraph and then I would look up and be like, do I understand that? Okay, I think I do. And then I could go on to the next. So yeah, that was a good one. And I've read it many times since.
I will get that book. That will be my next book. Who was the
A good
author?
one. It's a good one.
Who is it? Do you know who the author is? I'm sure there's only one,
It's
but
Jane Roberts, actually. Jane
Jane,
Roberts. Yeah.
perfect. So you typically, other than more of the Michael Singers, that kind of stuff, you're a nonfiction reader? Is that what I
Actually, I'm a
heard you say?
fiction reader.
Oh, a
I am a
fiction
fiction
reader.
reader, avid
Yeah.
fiction reader. And actually, I've taken to listening to a lot more than I used to. And it's because I can do, I need to be multitasking. So I can like, if I want to be out in the yard because I have 4 big dogs, so I got to clean up after them, takes a little bit of time. So I can be listening to a book. If I want to do anything in my garden, I can listen to a book. When I'm driving, I can listen to a book. If I'm going for a walk, I can listen to a book. So I can, do that way. So I'm a pretty voracious consumer of fiction.
Awesome. I am not. I like the nonfiction. I like Michael Lewis and all those kinds of
I do like Michael Lewis. I like to
conservative.
listen to Michael Lewis too.
Yeah, yeah, he's good. Excuse me, most impactful nonfiction, or excuse me, most impactful fiction book you've written of late? Written of late?
Well, I read The Covenant of Water, and I can't think of the author's name right now. It was Oprah's book club picked last summer. It's this big. It's like 700 or 800 pages. But his first book was called Cutting for Stone. And that book was the first fiction book where because I tend to underline and highlight things when I read nonfiction. I underlined and highlighted things in that book that were so beautifully, he's a doctor, And they were so beautifully written and articulated that I gasped when I read them. And one of them was in the book. One of his main characters is in an M&M, morbidity and mortality conference. They do those when patients die. And so the doctors who experienced it, all the med students and residents come in and they talk about the case and what happened. And in that conference, he asked the students, for lack of a better word, what is the most important treatment given by ear in an ER? And you're kind of like, treatment is given by ear. And the answer is words of comfort. Oh, right to the heart, right?
Yeah.
Words of comfort. I mean, it almost brings tears to your eyes, doesn't it? The
Yeah.
humanity of that, you know? So that's
Yeah.
definitely those two. He's just an amazing writer. I also love, oh, what's the one that just came out? Demon Copperhead. And I can't remember. It's not Margaret Atwood. It's the other one. I can't think of her name, but Demon Copperhead, amazing book. Amazing, amazing. Everybody in my family read it. Everybody loved it. It's just, I do not know how a woman of my age gets into the head of an adolescent boy who lives in Appalachia. I don't know how she does it, but she did. And it was remarkable, just remarkable. Yeah, she
So
wrote the
good.
Poisonwood Bible, and a bunch of other ones too. What was the other? Was it Unhoused? I think Unhoused or something like that. Unsheltered, something like that. That I just think she's a brilliant writer.
Fantastic. And who is it? Oh, the name escaped you.
I'm
Demon
going to have to
Copperhead.
look it up because it's going to
Yeah.
drive me crazy if I don't. So let me look up Demon Copperhead. Let's see. Let's see.
And while you're looking it up, I want you to think on this question. Um, you a lot of growth, you've done a lot of inner work, a lot of self-awareness. Catalyst for this sort of stuff in your youth? Were you just a seeker by nature, or you had tumultuous relationships, or does that?
Barbara Kingsolver, that's the author.
Okay.
She's brilliant. In terms of I think that I've always been a seeker, a learner, curious. Curious is I've always been curious to a fault about all sorts of things. That's why I read that Nature of Personal Reality. I was really curious about that. I'm a voracious fiction reader because I love being transported to another place by a brilliant writer who can spin a tale. Um, I am a huge advocate for therapy if you have access to that. That was the hardest work I ever did and the most valuable. And I always jokingly say, I spent tens of thousands of dollars on therapy. Shall we leverage it? I can share with you what she taught me. It's not my stuff. It's what she taught me. But that was really meaningful work. And I did it a couple times in my life, but the second time was right prior to and going through a divorce and then kind of all of that stuff that happened. And so I think that I've always been curious about my own life, about who am I? Why am I here? What's going on? I mean, I just saw something where it's like, you are a meat sack full of bones hurtling on a rock through space. You shouldn't be scared of anything, you know? It's okay. It's kind of one of those things. And, as you get older, like I know I always think it's kind of weird to think that I have less runway in front of me than I have behind me. I don't really spend a lot of time thinking about that. But I do think about what my legacy would be other than my son. And it would be this organization, this culture, which is why I don't really have an exit strategy, but I know for certain it's not selling it. Because even if I walked away with, bags of money, the culture would very likely fall apart. That's what I've seen happen. And that, other than me messing up parenting my son, but he seems to be pretty good. He's 23 and going to Georgetown Law School. So I think we're okay there. But other than messing that up, it would be the biggest failure in my life. Everything that I've worked for all of these years to build and to create and to just give it all up for money. I think that in my experience, I've seen a lot of business owners who've had very successful exits and have made a lot of money and good for them. But I think that and these are wonderful people, by the way, I'm not criticizing them, but that I think that in a world where we look only at the bottom line, I think that's actually aberrant thinking based on who we are, the way that we are made to be in communion and in relationship. We're not meant to live alone, and we're not meant to just look at money. I mean, obviously you can build a business based on that. There's a lot of really nasty people who have built big businesses based on only that. And I'm not here to say you can't do that. I'm here to say, as a human and your experience on this planet and living your life with joy and love and authenticity, it really is the opposite of looking only at the bottom line. I mean, of course, you have to look at the bottom line when you own a business. If you're a for-profit entity, yes, but that is not the only thing that you look at least in my experience.
Yeah. Yeah. It's good stuff. Good stuff, Christy. For if you were a younger woman or maybe an older woman, um, let's say you were a younger woman and you listening to this right now. Speak to the younger woman who's listening to this right now, or any woman, and is like, I want to start a business. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to build something. What's the opportunity that you see for them? Or what would you create if you would? Does that question make sense?
Yeah, it's such a different world now, Misha. I mean, you look at the way social media has taken over, and frankly, I don't think in a good way. And people make a lot of money as influencers, right? I mean, it's just, and it's all fake. It's not real. I mean, maybe there's some that's real. I don't want to dismiss all of it, but a lot of it is about what you look like, right? And all of that. And they make a lot of money. And if that's what somebody wants to do, I say by all means do it. Find somebody you think has done it well and mimic that. But if you want to do something else, I think what I would say is to find what, it sounds so silly, but it's the truth. Find what your passion is. What is that kernel within you that you really feel like you want to express, whatever that is? I mean, I always said that I would have started a business doing anything just so long I could be my own boss. I just didn't want somebody telling me when I could go on vacation. That was just me. And my dad had been self-employed. He didn't build a business, but he was a self-employed structural engineer my whole life. So I never saw him ever ask anybody to go on vacation or anything like that. And I saw the struggles too as a result of being a solopreneur. But if you want to start a business, I think that tell yourself the necessary lie. I would recommend that it will be easy. But the truth of the matter is that it's really hard, and that you should give yourself a pat on the back for even trying. I mean, I coach younger businesses, some of whom are female run, some of whom are male run. And my coaching style is very much, what you're doing is hard, and, give yourself a break. You're doing all the things right now. And I had one guy I was coaching, he said something about, we can't even figure out our costs. And I'm like, we are more than 10 times your size and we can't figure out our costs. So like, it's always a moving target, right? Everybody thinks somehow that you're going to have exact numbers. No company has exact numbers, and they're lying if they say they do, right? It's all an approximation, and it's a moment in time. And I'm always like, if we can get it 70 to 80% right, I'll be fine with that, as long as we can make sound decisions, right? I mean, yeah, it's like everybody wants things. We, as humans, we want simple solutions to complex problems, right? It's so much easier. Like I always say, it's so much easier to be a general than it is and tell people, just do what I say. I don't care what you think about it, get it done and report back. That is so much easier than being like, well, what do you think? What's your perspective? That's a new idea I hadn't considered, right? So you can do both work, right? Some people run their businesses like generals. I don't do that. I think that if you want to start a business, like I said, for me, it was based on kindness. I wanted to be kind to people. And at the time, I was terribly insecure. I hadn't gone through all the therapy yet. So I wanted to be everybody's favorite client. And then I also wanted to be everybody's favorite vendor because I wanted everyone to like me. That's not really my concern anymore. But I would say by and large, most people do like me because I'm pretty likable, because kindness is kind of my core who I am, and vulnerability. When you're a little vulnerable with people, they like you a little more because they're like, oh, look, she's not perfect either. Look at all the flaws, and boy, they are myriad. I could go on for hours about that. The mistakes I've made, legion, and I'm happy to share because I share with younger businesses because I say, I want you to go out and break it in a brand new way. You don't have to break it like I did. Break it in your own way and do it differently and do it better than I did. You know, have at
Mm,
it.
yeah. Give me a more outside of being an influencer, what is an opportunity that you see out there right now outside of what you do where you're like, oh my God, if I was going to start a business, I'd start doing this today.
I am looking at starting another business, but I don't think that it's something that a younger person would do. Um, I think, gosh, I'm not really sure where I see opportunities. I think one of the things that I've said when I was on a panel once talking to to a university entrepreneurial program, and everybody on the panel except me had a tech business. And I thought that was interesting. And so what I said to those people, many of whom were in the tech space, the students were studying tech things. And I'm like, that's where they think the money is because that's what they see, people building this business and selling it and making a lot of money and all that stuff. And this was a few years back, so that may have changed. But I remember saying to them, I'm the only one up here who doesn't have a tech business. I have a service business. And we all need coders. We all need technology, and God love them. But there is a lot of room in the service industry for businesses, whatever that may be. Whether it's consulting, whether it is content creation, whatever that may be. And in my experience, and I think this would still be true, even though I'm very far from the day to day, when we were building it, I used to say, it is so easy to be extraordinary because the bar is set so low. I mean, it really is. The bar is set incredibly low. And I think now where I would see the opportunity, whatever business you choose, because I don't know that I'm really an expert on that, so I can't really say, but whatever you choose, if you get really, really good at building relationships, not being transactional, and at getting things done, whatever it is that you want to do, then you will, in all likelihood, be successful.
Mm-hmm. It's good. 3 minutes on the business you're going to start or looking at,
Yeah,
or
it's actually, you know what? I don't think I want to talk about it yet. And the reason I will talk about it off camera with you. I don't want to talk about it yet because I think it's a really, really good idea. And I'm doing a beta test now, and I'm kind of keeping it close to the chest because I think that it could be big. I think it could be, or it may have no legs at all. So we're going to do an MVP, minimum viable product, see if it can work, low investment, and fail fast and see what happens.
love it. I love it. Minimum viable product, fail fast, test and try. How about this thought? One of my mantras of late has been the best is the enemy of more than good enough. Although you spoke to doing a good job, but I mean, I think we can get in a perfectionist mindset
Oh,
that
yeah,
slows us down a lot.
absolutely. Perfect is the enemy of complete.
So good. I want to be cognizant of everybody's time. So I think this is a great place to end. But before we do, any last thing, inevitably when I hit stop, when I'm interviewed, I'm like, oh, I wished I'd said this, or I wish I'd have said that. Anything come to your mind?
One thing I always share is something that a coach told me a very long time ago, at least 12 or 13 years ago. And I was building the business, and she said to me, you are your business, and your business is you, and it won't grow until you do. And that has stuck with me over the years. And in my own life, what I did at that time was I started a meditation practice, and I did it daily for a long time. Now I go in and out, even though it's the best thing you can do for yourself. But I did a daily meditation practice. I read a lot of the books that we mentioned, Deepak Chopra. I think I revisited The Nature of Personal Reality. I read the Michael Singer books, all those kind of things. And I really, really started. In fact, it was in 2009. That was the first time that the business hit 1 million in revenue because it really started growing right there because I was focused on growing. So when you asked me that question about what was the impetus, I think I kind of forgot that one. I mean, I was ready. I was coachable to hear that. And then I really did it. And it resulted in good growth, very good growth. I mean, it's been slow and steady for us. We're not someone that is like, growing 50% a year like VC money wants you to do. We don't do that. It's slow and steady wins the race. We're careful. We do it right. And I think that just understanding that your own personal growth will dictate your success in your life. Absolutely, unequivocally. I think that's true.
Mm, it's beautiful, Christy. Uh, great place to end. I am going to hit stop and we will say goodbye offline. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Table Rush Talk Show. For resources to help you sell your stuff, go to belove.media/resources. That's belove.media/resources. And be sure to subscribe, comment, 5-star, and share. Thank you again for listening.